Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Capture Business Decisions Using DMN, Introduction to Some Basic Patterns and Their Value. I'm your host, Liva Rendribasson, and on behalf of IIBA, thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar is a public event. It is designed to deliver practical resources for you as you continue to grow your skill set and deliver value within your organization. When you join IIBA, you become a member of an international association dedicated to developing and promoting the business analysis profession. Your IIBA membership gives you access to a vibrant BA community and resources to support your development and career growth. IIBA is a non-profit professional association serving the growing field of business analysis. And our goal is to unite a community of professionals to create better business outcomes. As the global thought leader and voice of the business analysis community, IIBA works to maintain global standards for the ongoing development of the practice and certifications. And this webinar is brought to you by our sponsor, IIBA sponsor, Red Hat, a leading provider of open source enterprise IT solutions. We would like to thank Red Hat for supporting IIBA and the business analysis community. We have two presenters today. Denis Gagnier is CEO and CTO of Tricetech, a leading enterprise modeling and automation enterprise software vendor. For more than 2 decades, Denis has been a driving force behind the majority of international BPM standards in use today. For the Object Management Group, Denis leads the BPM Plus Health Community Ambassador Program, is chair of the BPM Interchange Working Group, is an active contributing member of the Business Process, Case Management, and Decision Model and Notation teams. Matteo Mortari is a software engineer at Red Hat, where he contributes in rules development and support for the DMN standard. Matteo graduated from engineering with focus on enterprise systems, with a thesis involving rule engines, which sparked his interest and influenced his professional career since. He believes defining the business rules on the BRMS system not only enables knowledge inference from raw data, but most importantly, helps to shorten the distance between experts and analysts, between developers and end users, business stakeholders. Welcome, Denis and Matteo.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Liva, for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting us. And thank you for the wonderful introduction, by the way. So my name is Matteo Mortari. I'm a software engineer at Red Hat, and I'm joined here today by Denis Gagnier, if you want to say hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Denis Gagnier. And Matteo, I just realized that our pictures that were shown before are really misleading. I don't think we look anything like this anymore.
Yes, times have changed in very different ways, I would say. Okay, great. So we are really happy to be here today with you. We'd like to share how we can capture indeed a business decision using the DMN open standards. Today, we will focus on some introduction on basic DMN patterns and their value. When building the agenda for today, we really thought about how we can provide the most meaningful insight for you as a business analyst. And we will start with setting for the decision automation, the context, right, by speaking about why all of this is important, why we believe this is important. And then we will have a brief review about decision management and the DMN open standards. Then we will move to the core of the presentation for today, which will discuss some DMN patterns. So both from a theoretical foundation, but also on a practical demonstration with live demos. The patterns that we will see today will be question and answer, scoring, classification, and ranking. And then we will move to some conclusion and some resources that we would like to share with you today, if you're interested to know more. Next slide, please. So why not only when we do this kind of presentation, especially when I try to make this kind of presentation, I'd like to start with a brief discussion about why this is important. Not only because I'm a strong believer that it helps to set the context right, but also, especially with DMN, being an open standard in the way that it provides to you meaningful execution semantics, it helps you to go from the business analysis and from the business requirement specification on a model to the actual execution. So software that runs on the cloud, and basically it's not a DMN that exists in a vacuum. You can really make it available on cloud premise. Next slide, please. So throughout the years, I've collected some industry analyst reports, and I always like to collect them to understand what are the key trends, but also try to actualize them. So as we were speaking, most businesses are, this is a report from 451 Research from 2018. And here we were speaking about how to engage in digital transformation strategies, how cloud native application development is really the key and the centerpiece. And there are some key characteristics of cloud native developments which are important and really drive values to the business and to the organization. But also there is one key element that we found always go together between the cloud native application deployment and how you specify your decision logic, your rules. And the key point is indeed to have a way to specify your application so that you can design your logic in a way that you can quickly assemble it, so that you can specify how your process interacts and go on. This is another report from Gartner, more recent this year, and we are not really surprised to see that the cloud is still a key trend, of course, but also, as you can see, there are still the focus on what they call hyper-automation and intelligent composable business. So having a way to specify your decision logic, your business rule, your business requirements in a way that not only is formalized, but is also executable, is really at the key foundation of what you will actually see is a cloud native development. So this is just a brief introduction to set the context. And now, Denis, up to you for a brief recap.
Okay, so let me introduce you a little bit to what is decision management, and more particularly, what is the DMN standard. So DMN is a standard for decision management from the Object Management Group, OMG. And basically, it's a standard to standardize decision automation from modeling to automation. So we cover everything from actually capturing the specification of the decision and also the automation of the decision. DMN was created in complement to BPMN, which is more known maybe, the business process model annotation, and CMMN, the case management model annotation. So we're not going to spend a whole lot of time in teaching the DMN itself. It's actually quite simple. There's just a few shapes. So when you see a rectangle, you're looking at a decision. When you see an oval shape, you're looking at a data input. And those are the two main elements. The arrows are what we call information requirements. So to read this, you could simply go, decision 1 has an information requirement of the result of decision 2 and input data 3. And for decision 2, it requires input data 1 and input data 2. And then we have a couple more shapes, the business knowledge model, which are a way to reuse existing logic that is encapsulated into a business knowledge model. And we have the knowledge source, which provide the authority under which the work is done. So it's basically your references or your official references. In DMN, the way we captured the logic beyond the decision requirement diagram that we just looked at, the logic of the specific decision is expressed using the friendly enough expression language field, and the most used box expression that we call them is a decision table. So most people are familiar with decision table. If you are not, they're quite simple again. Each row represents a rule, and each input column is a condition, and then you have the output of your decision as the last column here. So if you read this very simply, it says, if input data 1 is true, if input data 2 is true, then decision 2 is true. and you can read each row as a basic rule of that format. So that was our quick introduction to DMN. I hope that was enough to give you a good sense. Maybe a lot of you already know about DMN. So what's more interesting is really, why are we using decision rather than working directly with rules? And these are the main reasons. So decision have a direct business value. When you have a decision, the decision leads you to a next step or the follow-on in your activities or in your task, in your process, in your case. So a decision has direct value, where a rule is less clear whether the rule has direct value. A decision are better units of reusability, more manageable than rules, and certainly are perfectly aligned to process and case and can help support metrics directly. We usually don't want to know how many of these rules happened. We want to know how many decisions did we make, what was the result of these decisions, and that's what we're really interesting from a business point of view. When we look at decision management and in DMN, what's really interesting is there's a lot of books available already. There's training, there's best practices, there's a lot of knowledge and trained professionals also that are available. We also have a lot of tools that help you elicit the knowledge. So for business analysts, capture your requirement in a clear, unambiguous way. And as Matteo alluded to, this is scalable, cloud-based, and allows runtime, which allows you to do different monitoring and improvement. So how does DMN fit? It's a sister or sibling standard to other standards, CMMN, BPMN, DMN, and PMML. PMML, may be less known in this context, is a prediction model standard that covers everything from decision trees to standard deviation, sorry, not standard deviation, but neural networks and different types of prediction model. So what are the main benefits of using DMN itself? Is that with DMN, you're taking a model-driven approach, and that means that you have a single artifact, which is that model, that decision model captured in DMN, that is the documentation for your decision. The same model is the specification of how that decision is taken, and you have the decision logic, how you actually execute that decision or how you make that decision, and it's also the code. So it's a single artifact, and you as a business analyst are quite aware of all the problem of going from one artifact to the other, from a narrative text to a set of requirements, to a set of pseudocode, to actual code, and managing all these life cycle of these different artifacts so that they are in line. In this case, you have a single artifact that plays all that role. So it's the same artifact used by the subject matter expert, by the analyst, and by the coder. There's a single artifact, and that saves a lot of work and problem. So let's get in, now that we've done this little introduction, let's get right into those patterns that we wanted to really discuss today. We have quite a few patterns we want to jump in, so let's move into that. So as Matteo introduced, we're going to do one of the core pattern, which is really the pattern of DMN, which is the question and answer pattern. We're going to do two more basic patterns, scoring and classification. And then we're going to do one more advanced pattern of ranking. There are other patterns available like data validation, time series type of pattern that we will not cover today, but just wanted to throw a few there to make you aware that those patterns exist. So back to you, Matteo, for the Q&A pattern.
Thank you, Denis. And indeed, when we speak about the Q&A core pattern, please don't think necessarily only as a sort of like a multiple choice question and answer. Here is really one of the key foundation of DMN. Is a way that a model is really meant to provide an answer to a question or sub-question that you may have in the model. So these also you can see that is foundational in the standard specification itself, because each DMN decision can have these attributes that are called question and allowed answer. The question one you can represent with a natural language specification, description, characterize really what is the key question that the decision stands for. So you will be able to really explain it with a more natural language, what is the meaning behind that decision and what the question that is really trying to address. And go in pair with the allowed answer, you can use still a natural language description to specify what is the expected output of such a decision. This is very important a lot of times when you have like enumerated values, because you can specify with a more descriptive way what is the result of that specific key decision logic that you are iterating. Or especially when you have yes or no, is like you can describe it in a more friendly way. So here is one example that you see is the PHQ-9 question in the healthcare domain to determine basically what is the severity for the depression of the patient. And here you can see that there are two decisions. The PHQ-9 score eval is meant to be answering the question, what is the PHQ-9 score itself of the patient? And you have a verbal description of what is the answer. It will be a number between, it says really verbatim, greater than equal to 0 and less than 27. But then it's even more important when you get to the severity of depression decision, which just by looking at the DRG itself, it may not be self-explanatory, but is actually answering the question, what is the severity of the depression of the patient, and the list of the allowed answers that are available. So next slide, please. There is another example that we can show that is about the financial score calculation. Next slide, please. And you will be able, basically here is even more evident. It's like credit score rating is meant to be answering the question, what is the credit rating for the borrower, which is maybe something that was not immediately clear, or is like when you try to come up with a short description, short name for the decision is not immediately evident. But then you can use it as well for the loan pre-qualification decision. For instance, personally, I was never an expert about loans, and here is a definition. It's like, is the borrower successfully pre-qualified for the requested loan? And you can use this textual notation. It is a visual description, a visual artifact of DMN. You can take it to make it very clear what are the attributes of the decision itself, which otherwise will be sort of like hidden in a model in the actual serialization of the file. So we don't have a demo for this for this pattern and for these two examples, because actually those are foundational. So now Denis will take over and you will be able to see them in action in the next pattern, which is scoring. Denis.
Wonderful, thank you, Matteo. So the Q&A pattern, as Matteo explained, that's the meat and potato of DMN. Each DMN decision represents a question and the possible answers. Now, using that, we can create models using different patterns. One of the patterns that is often used is one that is of scoring, which is basically to look at the different variable or inputs and provide a weight for them so that it will result in a score. Now, this score is usually reused somewhere else for categorization, decision, and kind of ranking. And we often use a decision table to create that score. So again, let's go back to the PHQ-9 example here, where here we were doing a scoring of the PHQ. The PHQ stands for Patient Health Questionnaire 9. It's 9 health questions that are asked, and you see these 9 questions are my different inputs here, and the output is the score. And you can see that for each of my rules, for the first question, depending on the answer of the patient, we will score them differently. And this decision table is a C+ hit policy. It means that it will cumulate and add all the different scores for all the different answers that are provided to all the questions. So it gives you a full look at it. So that's how we have basically a score. We obtain a score. So let me move on to another small example here where we're more in the financial type of environment, where we have the data from the applicant and we try to score various facets, the payment history, the outstanding debts, the credit history, etc. And we're scoring all these different aspects of the patient's, not the patient, the applicant's data. to get a score. Now, in this case here, the score, rather than being multiple answer, you see that a score is provided based on a particular range. So depending on the range of value, you will get a different score. So just to show that scoring is not just based on Q&As and particular answers that are literal, it could be based on input that are ranges, and based on those ranges, we provide a score. So let me move into the example here. So I have the PHQ-9 example, so let me run this. And here I have all my different questions, my 9 questions, and depending on what I answer, so maybe this was for several days. This question, yes, several days too. Here, more than half the days, and I can run this. And then you can see that I have a score of 4. So I'm obtaining a score of 4, and I can look how I obtain a score of 4 by seeing that different rules, quote unquote, match. So my first answer gave me a 0, second answer a 0, another 0. Here I had a score of 1 for that question, 0, a score of 1, 0, a score of 2. So this got all added up to give me my score of 4. Very similarly, if I look at this financial example with the data, and if I run this example, so I'll say false, since 5 months, average credit balance, let's say $1,500. Month as a client, I've been a client at the bank for 36 months. I've inquired only once, and I only have 2 bank cards. And then you see that for my outstanding debt here, I have a score of 15. Again, I can go look, and you can see that because of my outstanding balance that I emitted, this is the score that I'm provided. We can see also that we have scoring for all the other attributes. I don't want to spend too much time into those details, but each attribute very similarly provide me a score there based on data range. So you can see that scoring is a very simple pattern, but it's a very useful pattern to create some different ranking in a decision that you have. So let me move back here to my slides. And, okay. Naturally, here I am. So that was the scoring pattern. I'll pass it back to Matteo for the classification pattern.
Thank you, Denis. And actually, yes, I also share, try to share the screen again, because myself, I've lost the button to do that. More. Okay. Sorry, just also to take on the demo from Denis. Here, I think is a good point that we can start to show one of the key aspects of DMN, which is the ability for interchange. And you see, Denis just demonstrated to you this financial scoring pattern. This is a specific DMN model. And basically what you can do is that you can export it in the interchange format of DMN. This is a file. And I have actually already running it here locally. So first, I would like to show you how these DMN models can be used in an application that is deployed on the cloud. Basically, what it happens, as you can see here, I'm taking more the role of the, let's say, the hat of the software developer. I'm using the same model that Denis has just shown to you. And also another possibility is to come up with a series of integration test scenario that you may want to really ensure that are meaningful. So in this case here, you can see that I have a few example data, and what is the result that I expect. This is a way that you can use between as an interchange, as a sort of like a bridge from the business analysis, from the business requirement capture up to the deployment with the software developer, because here is a place where with the DMN model and a set of integration tests, you can make sure that basically the requirements are met in a few scenarios that are here, so that would allow me to really run the application as I would expect. But also here I have it running on the background. So what is happened is that I can quickly show it to you in a first demo. And basically here, once you have it running, you have as well a way that the developer can use this model to come up immediately with the definition of the interface. That can be a visual interface like we're seeing here, but behind the scene there are standard REST APIs that they can use. So as you see here, basically, if you pay attention to when Denis demonstrated this model, you can really use the same also list of values. And this is really important because I haven't done anything special. What I just did is that I've taken the same model, and basically you can evaluate for the same result. So basically what you see while you are in the modeling phase and when you hand over to the developer for the deployment, then is really the power of DMN that shines. Now, to the next pattern, which is very, very important, I think, as well, is about classification, and we will differentiate what it means between categorization. So every time that we have a decision, a variable, we are interested to make a differentiation of it, to classifying it in order to be better understood, potentially in a decision down the line. Normally, this you will see it often used to verbalize classes, and very typically, this is used as a downstream from the scoring pattern. So you have the scoring pattern that Denis just shown to you, and you use that as an input now to do classification. When we speak about classification, we really mean to separate based on some class labels. You may find this as a put in similarity with clustering, so separating based on similarities, and this is a part that classification comes into play with clustering, which is though something else. And you can speak about categorization where you have technically subsumming classes, but in pragmatical terms, what it means is that you are trying to build a taxonomy. For instance, the tires of the car are part of the chassis, which is part of the car itself. So you are drilling down in a taxonomy. And you may have a segmentation, which is this junk categorization completed. So here we will see some examples. Here is the BMI score. It is a way to really classify based on a scoring what is the category if you are underweight or going to obesity. This is one example where you can see, okay, given the scoring pattern that Denis just shown, here you can see is part of the input. So once I've determined with the scoring pattern what is the BMI score itself, I can now categorize it with the different values that you see here. Another pattern may be for sound intensity. So sound intensity is measured in decibel, but how does it impact? You can really make it evident with a classification. You can say, okay, between a certain range up to 80 decibel, there is no risk. Then it starts to be harmful, danger, reversible damages, depending on the ranges that this decibel value has. And in even severe cases can lead to death. Here is another way that you can express a classification. Depending on the age, you may want to define what is the typical classification that you put down maybe on a healthcare record. And finally, as well, is we've seen it in a brief anticipation earlier, where we use the PHQ-9 score to later determine the classification as a severity of depression. Finally, a very well-known example is when you come up with a loan pre-qualification. And here is really when, again, you use a scoring that you see here, used then as an input for the classification based indeed on the scoring and other criteria. In this case are other inputs. So here I will show you the demo. So let me just stop the previous one that I was running. Allow me to switch. And I want to show first here I can close it. So we can take one example, which is about the sound levels that always I find it very the easier one to start with. So here it's a very simple model. So you can take this one as well to have a sort of like a lean introduction to classification. I have the decibel level is expressed as an input data of DMN, and then I want to determine the sound intensity based from the decibel, how much is this sound intensity. And basically here you can see that it has a different way to express, okay, it can, based on these ranges, what is the value. So again, as we were showing, you have in DMN being an interchange format, the logic is fully expressed here. So this is a way that you can use both on the, in this case, on the TriSoTech platform. You can run it directly here if you wanted, so as a first test as well. Also, Denis later will explain to you as well that they can deploy to production on the cloud these DMN models. But here I want to stress out the importance of DMN as an open standard. I can download this model, and it is a file. So the file, what I can do is that I can take it, and I already, like in the best cooking show, I've already prepared it on the side in an application that is used by the developer. So what happens is that you see here, first of all, what is maybe obvious, but as a standard specification, it must be explicit, is that also the shape and the sort of like the visual representation is the same. And also the logic as well, you can see it is the same. So first of all, this is another editor, the open source editor that we give as Red Hat. But as you can see, we being agreeing on the standard, it is the same. Then finally, this is a DMN model that can be used by developer to deploy their application on the cloud. So here, just maybe I know that the audience is mainly about business analysts, but it's just to give an hint, just a brief hint about how these DMN models are really indeed can be used not only to capture a business requirement, but to really to immediately deploy to production with the help of the developers. So what they have available as well is a technical representation for the sound intensity. So in this case here, you see it's a more technical interface, but I think that you can follow. Basically, I'm saying again, okay, I want to test out my model for the decibel level of 80. And in the answer is basically, you can see that it poses no risk. But if I move it to something like a more impressive sound, you may have irreversible damages. So this is a way that you can use the model as an interchange. Again, let me take very briefly another example, like the loan prequalification. Here is a way that you describe the classification based on the scoring. As you can see here, we try to tie it a little bit more all together, where we go from the scoring to the classification. Here you have your classification and what you can use it for. On the backend here, I prepared again some test scenarios. These are important because, of course, me as a sort of like playing both the role of the business analyst and the software developer, we can formalize together a set of scenarios that we can agree with the business stakeholder to make sure that given specific inputs, then what are the results that we expect from this model. And as you can see here, it is a visual representation, but basically what happens is that as my software, it's compiled basically, these test scenarios are evaluated and are meant to be always be passing. It's a way to ensure that you don't have regressions or bugs in your software. And I think it is a good sort of like a end-to-end demos about how you can take your models and using it on the different platforms, and thanks to the power of the DMN open standards. Denis? I think that the next one is yours.
Thank you, Matteo. So I hope from what you've seen, you're gathering that as we presented in the introduction, the power of using DMN as a standard is that it is interchangeable. So Matteo was showing how we were doing from TriZetech to Red Hat execution back and forth. We also pressed upon the fact that there's a single artifact. So that file that Matteo was exporting, that's your model of DMN. So the model is the requirement, is the documentation, and is the code to execute. There's a single file. So we've looked at the Q&A pattern, which is the core pattern of DMN. Always we look at decision in DMN as a question and the allowed answer. We look at the scoring pattern, which is a way to assign a value to various inputs. And then we saw how often that scoring that we do with the scoring pattern can be used in a classification pattern where we use the score to classify or categorize the inputs into a particular category. So these are pretty much the core patterns that you will see and use regularly doing different business analyst model for decision. We're going to look now at a little bit more advanced pattern, which is the ranking pattern. Basically, it's a model through which a position or a rank is assigned to each item in a collection. So the pattern's a little bit more complex, but it's not, and again, we use the score pattern. So the pattern for the rank pattern is more obvious from the decision requirement diagram, the DRD. So here you can see that as an input, I have a collection of items. So the 3 bars here indicate that I have multiple elements. So I have a collection of input, in this case, a vaccine list. And then I go to a decision, and this particular decision will iterate. So I have an iterator that will go through the list of vaccine and obtain a score from a reuse function here that is my scoring function for each of the vaccine. And then I'll use the rank of the list, which turns out to be pretty much just a sorting based on that score that was available. So the pattern's a little bit more complex. I won't go into too much detail of it, but one way to look at the box expression is through this iteration box expression here, which simplify the reading. So this is the middle box here in this diagram, right in the middle. And basically what we're doing is we're taking the inputs, which is the list of vaccine, and we're saying for each vaccine in my vaccine list, call the vaccine effectiveness knowledge source for that vaccine. And here you can see the potential inputs that are there. So again, this notion that there's always a question and there's the potential answer. So let me move into that example. So if I go here now, I have that same example where my input, so if I run this, the first thing is I have to provide my input. So I already have one there, AstraZeneca, and let's say I'm also considering Moderna vaccine, and let's say I'm also looking at the Pfizer vaccine. So these 3 vaccines are my input list. I can run the model against this, and then I can see that my ranked list is that the Pfizer vaccine has the highest effectiveness, followed by the Moderna vaccine, and then finally the AstraZeneca vaccine. So again, I could go back and change my list and say, I'll delete this one, I'll keep the Pfizer one because it's one of the potential one that I have here. Let's say I have the Sinovac, which is a Chinese vaccine, and I have the EMLA. I run it against this list, and now I have my ranked list that tells me Pfizer is still the most effective in that list. Then it's my Camellia, and then the Sinovac vaccine. So you can see here that these are ranked in there. So again, a pattern of taking a list, iterating over the list, getting the score and the information for that vaccine, and then based on that score, basically just carrying out a simple sorting. So let me switch back to my presentation here. So a little bit more advanced pattern, and now I'll pass it to Matteo to look at a more global example using DMN for you to understand how this can be all put together.
Yes, thank you, Denis. Let me share the screen. And indeed, this is a pattern that I've seen. Actually, it is a model that I've seen being using in production. I hope that you can see my screen. Denis, if you can just confirm it, because
Yes.
here on my, okay, thank you, sorry. It's very dear to me because I really think that puts well together both the pattern that we've been discussing today, but also shows the power of the DMN as an open standards and the impact that actually have standards like these ones. So this is a case study basically of patient discharge from the ICU after a surgical operation. The flow of action that basically take place that are described in this use case is that you have, of course, a monitoring for the vitals and some evaluation, which is performed by the medical staff in short terms to basically understand if the patient may be discharged from the ICU, I put in the word, or if the patient may still need to be there. Between all the evaluation and the monitoring of vitals, there is one score which is internationally recognized, which is called the Aldrete score. And the paper, it's here. It's Italian for a good reason, but I can describe it quickly to you. Basically, you have a set of question and answer patterns, like monitoring the vital, understanding what they are. It gives a score to that, and then finally it gives a classification that basically would sort of like support the decision of the discharge or not. The key point, though, that personally understood during studying this use case is that there is a key element in the DMN, in the Italian application of this scoring, which requires that the answer to all of the vitals must be at least greater than 0. So this is a requirement that, as far as I could tell, is only applied to the Italian country. And basically, you can model that with DMN. While instead, if you have an opaque, sort of like a black box application, you are not sure if it is taking which version of the standard. So this is a way that you can really make show the impact of this decision model, because I have it prepared here. So as we learn, we have some input data, and we can determine the score based on each of these inputs. So here is like for each of the questions and the answer that are given, we determine a score. Then finally, we sum the score all together. And finally, we can categorize to decide if the patient may be discharged or not. And this model is not only powerful to describe and to capture all of these requirements, but also to put it into production. Because now, okay, here is a simplified interface, but of course, you can use it as a support of like a clinical decision support endpoints that may integrate within your IT systems. And once it's given, basically here I'm taking a very good scenario. So everything is a sort of like between the norms or not differentiable from the norm. Then basically you have that you determine the full Aldrete score and the actual categorization, which is the fact that the patient may now leave if so the medical staff determines that at least for the Aldrete score, it's supporting that decision. So it's an example that is very dear to me because I think it shows altogether not only from the patterns that we've seen, but also the impact of the open standards and really the impact that it has on the use case that it, in this case is about an hospital. So as we move to the conclusion, I will invite Denis to come on stage. I can move the slide, Denis.
I was already in the process of switching it. Okay, so to move to our conclusion, basically, I think the conclusion here is very simple. We provided you hopefully a brief introduction to decision management and DMN to put you in context a little bit. We then introduce a series of DMN patterns that you can use to elicit knowledge or capture the knowledge of your subject matter expert into a clear and simple structure. And then we also demoed the interoperability between the tools using that standard. We also added to our slide a series of resources. You can grab those from the slides, which are available. A couple of books from Bruce Silver on DMN, some industry standards that we were looking at on the financial side. There's the MISMO for the mortgage industry that uses DMN. And on the healthcare side, there's the BPM Plus Health work group that's using DMN also. And there's a couple of community you may want to be aware of, general community. One is the TCK, which is a group that tests all the different tools from the different vendors to make sure that they are following the standard correctly. And there's the decision community, decision management community, where a lot of people with interest to decision management are get together, I guess. So we're open to question now. I don't know how much time we have for question. I'll go back to Livia.
We have about 14 minutes, and thank you again, Denis and Matteo. The first question that could be on people's mind is, how do I get involved with DMN? How do I pitch DMN into my organization?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a loaded question, but fundamentally, so the getting involved part, as we just mentioned, there's a series of books. There's a lot of books available. There's a lot of training too. There are different people that offer training for DMN. So that's one way to get involved, is to learn about the standard. You can get it from OMG, the Object Management Group, where you'll get the actual specification, but that may be a little tougher to consume. So I suggest finding some books. There's a lot of good books. There's a full collection of books actually around DMN. That's probably your best start. There's also a lot of e-learning and different courses training for DMN. So a good place to start. The decision community, decision management community is another good place to find different resources. Naturally, the Red Hat website and the TriZetech website have a lot of resources. As for convincing internally, then you fall into the business case of this, and different vendors, certainly TriZetech and Red Hat, offers you some material to build your business case in those situations. So we invite you to contact either of us or both of us for those aspects. Matteo, do you want to add anything else?
No, I think that you summarized really well, correctly. If you are more interested, also is like normally like in a Google search, you will find this website, which is called Learn DMN in 15 minutes. It's not a full course, because in 15 minutes you cannot really do much, but it's a way to really start to think about the details about each of the decision logic. So beyond all the resources that I fully agree with Denis, and I hope that between this presentation and the resources that we share, you can involve, but don't hesitate to get in touch. You have our contacts, so don't hesitate to get in touch if you are not finding what the one tailored to your needs.
Great, that's a great answer. So the application that you were demoing, it's a Red Hat TriZetech decision modeler. We have actually a question about the TriZetech modeling suite. Are there any concerns or issues with using the TriZetech modeling suite to create DMN and using rules to execute that DMN? Will this work? And the second part is, will this work okay when the model has an embedded decision service requiring 2 or more DMN XML files to be executed by rules?
Yeah, so the answer is yes, but that's probably not the answers you wanted. So fundamentally, yes. So certainly TriZetech and Red Hat has a lot of testing that were done. We've been doing a lot of joint development between the two companies to make sure that the TriZetech modeling can export and be executed on the Red Hat platform, and that includes the Drools platform, which is the community version, but also on Decision Manager, which is the productized version of the rules. And that runs true. And yes, you can have a model that has different services that are called and that can be exported and executed on both platforms, vice versa. So you can do some models in the DMN modeler of Red Hat, export them, import them in the TriZetech automation platform, the digital automation platform from TriZetech, and it will run there seamlessly. And that's the power of standards, really, is when you have companies like both Red Hat and TriZetech that adhere to the standard, then you're sure that you have that transparent exchange. And one of the resources that we were showing is the DMN TCK at the end. Let me slide to it. There you see the results of the different vendors, so you can see to what level the different vendors cover. You just have to press the overview and the all test button, and this will tell you which pattern are covered by which vendor and how transparently you can exchange from tool to tool.
Excellent. Another question is, which is around what are feasible methods or tools to feed machine learning models with DMN models of policies or regulations?
Matteo, you want to take first crack?
Yeah, I will take this one. So actually, it's like if you search on YouTube for decision management and machine learning, you may find some presentation that I think also a few we done also jointly with TriZetech. Basically, I would argue you have a good integration because with machine learning models, you may decide to export them with the PML standard, which is another open standard from another consortia that describes predictive machine learning models. And the DMN standards, the really interesting things is that it's built with intent really from the specification to integrate with PML. So what you can do is that you may have a neural network, let's say, of any sort. You use your own machine learning flow normally to do your own machine learning activities. Then the key step is that instead of persisting it into a proprietary format, let's say, you persist it with PML. Both TriZetech modeler and the Red Hat modeler, the open source modeler that we've shown as well, have the ability to guide you on how you can invoke and integrate these PML models with DMN. And also when you put it into production, they also work because we support the execution as well of the machine learning models, the DMN models. So what you can do, and there is a demo for credit card dispute that shows the power of this integration, where the estimation of the risk are done basically from a predictive machine learning models, and then the decision model is the one taking in charge. Okay, now what do we do? What would we decide that we as the human, as the business, as the stakeholder, that we do based on the assessment of the risk? Because it's good that you delegate the estimation to a predictive machine learning models, but then how you operate the business, how you make your decision, how you structure your process, you can use the power of the DMN and the BPMN standards to match that.
Yeah, and I just want to add to this. So there's two pattern of integration if you want for your predictive models. You can either, as Matteo said, do it at the model level so that you have your predictive model, and if you bring it in as a PMML file, you can have it execute right within your DMN because PMML is integrated with DMN. But you can also have a pattern where you leave your predictive model externally and you can invoke it as a REST service. Both TriZetech and Red Hat support the REST invocation of a predictive model and bring this value, which normally will be either a score or a classification when you're going to use predictive model. So that's why we touch on these patterns today. They're so core pattern to everything we do when we do decisioning.
Excellent. We do have a little bit more time for questions. If you do have a question, please feel free to enter it in the questions box. One of the key questions is about the webinar. The webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our iiba.org archive page within 7 business days. It will also be posted on YouTube. And also, if you have questions, additional questions after this webinar, you can see on the screen on the presentation Matteo and Denise email address.
Yes.
Yeah, don't hesitate to engage, because also, at least I speak from a software development perspective as a software engineer. I'm surprised in a good way that sometimes we find in different mailing lists and in different communities really questions that are more just about DMN per se, more than actually, oh, I'm trying to run it with Trizetech or with Red Hat. Are really questions about like how I can model this. So we are happy, of course, to take any questions on those communities.
Excellent.
Okay, well, we certainly hope these patterns will be useful for you in DMN. And if DMN is new to you, we hope we showed you all the different ways in which you can use DMN to clearly capture how decisions are made within your organization.
There's actually a couple of more questions that came in.
Okay.
Can you please share the name or the link of the open source environment that Matteo, you demonstrated?
Well, it's even easier. So if that person that asked the question is still on the line, I invite you to open a web browser, Chrome, Firefox, or what you use. And if you type in dmn.new as a URL address, you will open directly the modeler. So of course, this is an open source modeler that we offer, but also as well, if you're interested in the Trizetech modeler that also we shown today, then you can get in touch with Denis or on the Trizetech website, trizetech.com, to ask to be engaged with them.
And the other question we received is about the model. Can this model be used across all sectors, industries?
Yes.
Definitely, yes.
Yes.
I've seen, but I
Go
think
ahead.
that Denis has seen much more than me, to be honest, because myself, I'm more involved on the software development side. But even from sectors like the position where I am, I've seen it really used for banks, loan application, insurance, the healthcare, as we shown today, but also as well sometimes for e-commerce, like discount policies, and really you name it. So frankly speaking, I think also before becoming a software engineer, I played the role of the business analyst. And if only I had the DMN standard available back then, it would have really supported a lot of my use cases. Denis?
Yeah, DMN is used in all industries. I've seen lots of examples in the agriculture industry, in the chemical industries, retail, entertainment. And that's the power of DMN. It's a language to capture how decisions are done, what information is required to do the decision and what logic is used to make the decision, regardless of your industry or your business. And the pattern we showed today, and that's what we tried to show with different examples in healthcare and finance, those patterns, you can reuse those patterns in just about any industries.
We have one last question. I think we have time for one last. How do we model nested decisions?
So the concept of nested decision, I'm not sure what you mean, but if you mean a series of decision based one on the other, it's basically like that hierarchy that I showed at the introduction, that decision 2 required the results of decision 1, which may require the results of another decision. So you can have a full graph. So it's not just a hierarchy that you build. With DMN, you can create a full graph of interdependencies between decisions. So, and if you want to have more example, you can reach to either Matteo or myself, and we can show you examples of those.
Perfect. And yes, you answered the question.
Okay, great.
Thank you. So that's everything for today. We really appreciate your time and your knowledge, Denis and Matteo. Everybody, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate it. Hope it was we feel it was a useful session today. And if you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to Matteo and Denis. Have a good afternoon, rest of the day, or morning, wherever you are.
Thank you for having us. It was a pleasure. Thank you.